I'm Jon Negroni from the San Francisco Bay Area and from the Pittsburgh Bay Area. It's Will Ashton.
Hi, Johnny. How you doing?
Nice shades. I love them.
Oh, thank you, Johnny.
Well, Ashton, how was your holiday weekend? Sounds like you went through a bit of a transformation.
I'm doing all just fine there, Johnny. I've been just hanging out, having the time of my life.
That sounds like you're in the mode, the spirit of a certain movie that we're here to talk about.
Well, I'm like to think my life is like a bunch of motion pictures.
Well, we are, of course, here to talk about A Complete Unknowna, the new film about Bob Dylan. And Will, I have a little bit of a surprise for you.
Oh, well, who's this Will guy you keep talking of?
Sorry, I forgot. I'm talking to the tambourine man.
Hey, Johnny. Yeah, you got it.
Is there any way we can get Will Ashton on the horn?
I don't know. You're going to have to do like a seance or some kind of...
Seance? He's dead?
I don't know, man. I don't know who you're talking about, man. I'm just being my own.
It sounds like what you're trying to tell me is that you broke into Will Ashton's apartment. You don't know who he is.
Yeah.
And you stole his podcasting equipment.
Yeah.
Coordinated a schedule
Yeah.
to podcast with me. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've always recording, I'd just be talking on this mic and I'd be singing and I'd be playing on my high harmonica and, I'd just be doing my thing.
You've never sounded more Minnesotan to me, quite honestly.
Minnesota. I am from no man. I'm no place, no time. I'm a man of any time, place, or plane.
Yes. You're from the circus though, right?
Yes.
Well, I guess since Will Ashton's not here, I'll give this surprise to you because I guess I have no choice. But I thought, you know what? After I watched A Complete Unknowna, which, pretty standard biopic about Bob Dylan, yeah.
I'm no standard man, though.
Well, I was kind of looking at, I was kind of like, well, this isn't a standard podcast.
I know. I don't know what even a podcast is. Is it like a recording session with my friends where we just talk instead of singing and talking?
I'm pretty sure Bob Dylan knows what podcasts are. He's not dead.
Bob is a man that don't know everything, but something you know.
I like to think that Bob Dylan listens to podcasts, maybe not ours. But
I don't know. What do you think he listens to? What do you think he be listening to on his Walkman?
Yeah, on his Walkman. I don't know. First of all, I think it's an iPod Classic, and I would guess the Beatles.
That's the podcast he's listening to is the Beatles.
The Beatles podcast, yeah.
Beatles podcast. Well, who hosts that?
Ringo.
Ringo.
Yeah, I actually don't know if they do a podcast, but that would be kind of fun. No, maybe he listens.
And Ringo?
You know what? I think that he probably listens to Office Ladies, Bob Dylan.
I could see it.
Yeah. Maybe he does. He listened to our film review once of Life Itself. That one with Olivia Wilde and Oscar Isaac.
Life Itself, that's a big old question right there, isn't it?
That is what that was called, right? Or was it Life as We Know It? Or
you talking about my friend Roger?
No. Okay, this is gonna bother me, but it was that movie from the people who made Parenthood.
You talking about? Oh, not Parenthood. That was This Is Us.
Oh yeah, I think they did both, but yeah, it was like a movie though, and it was in the same kind of style, and it was like Antonio Banderas was in it too.
Yeah, it was Life Itself. It
was Life Itself for sure.
Yeah, I looked up on my Walkman.
Yeah, there it is. I see it. Yeah. Fantastic movie. I'll never understand why it has a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes, but
I'm not breaking this bit, by the way. I'm going to keep talking like this the whole time.
That is actual torture. Can I would personally love it if we could have a conversation about this movie. But
I'd love to talk about it with my friend Johnny Cash, right?
All right. Well, I was gonna do so, but since Will's not here, I guess we won't do it.
Johnny here?
I guess we'll review this movie. No, Johnny Cash is not here.
Oh, I love talking to my friend Johnny. Johnny's a big influence on mine,
So A Complete Unknowna. This is the latest film from James Mangold. The guy behind Walk the Line, Logan, Ford v Ferrari.
Johnny.
There you go. Also, what was that movie he did? It was either this year or last year. It was
Ford versus Ferrari?
No, he did something else recently. It was like, Indiana Jones. That's right.
Indiana Jones and a Dial of Destiny.
Yeah, last summer. But anyway, this time
I had a Dial of Destiny when I went with Woody Guthrie.
Well, hey, yeah, okay. This time he's taken on the early years of Bob Dylan's career in this film, A Complete Unknowna. It's written by Jay Cox, the guy who did Gangs in New York. Big draw here is... Say again?
What do you call me?
I called you nothing. I'm deeply regretting this entire conversation, really.
You told me I could pick the movie. I picked the movie about me.
I told Will Ashton that. This is my first time ever talking to you.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Exactly. So No, but the big draw here, I think, really pivoting around or centering around the entire marketing campaign has been Timothée Chalamet. So Timothée Chalamet steps into the shoes of the folk icon, the legend himself. Alongside him, we also have Monica Barbaro as Joan Baez. Elle Fanning is in kind of a fictional supporting role, but it's based on a real person. And of course, I think some standouts. I mean, we have Scoot McNairy in here as Woody Guthrie. We have Edward Norton as Pete Seeger, Jared Fogler. I mean, it's quite the cast. And this isn't really like those kind of more artsy and dreamlike takes on Dylan, which Todd Haynes' I'm Not There did brilliantly so, in my opinion. I think you agree. But yeah, Mangold's doing something a little bit more standard here, a bit more grounded, kind of focused on a kind of standard linear take on Dylan's meteoric rise in the 1960s.
What about my movies?
Your movies? What?
Yeah, Master Anonymous.
So anyway, the film digs into a lot of things with Dylan. It's really kind of just exploring, like, yes, how did he become, his breakout success and everything, but also what were his relationships like? What was his ambition, if he really had one as an artist? Living in Greenwich Village, dealing with the cultural chaos of the time, and what really made the guy tick, basically. The movie's also trying to spotlight a lot of the music that inspired him, the music that he kind of haphazardly, that kind of turned him haphazardly into like a civil rights icon at one point. And so it's interesting because the movie's clearly trying not to be too abstract or oblique. It's not trying to be as artistic as the man himself, as his music is. And yet, the film's hasn't really taken off with audiences in terms of box office success. It's not a Bohemian Rhapsody situation. It only made around 20-ish million in its opening weekend over the holidays. It's been out for a couple weeks now, and yeah, it hasn't even made its budget back yet. It's kind of weird. It's kind of strange because I thought this thing would be maybe not the biggest hit, but I thought it would do better because they were taking fewer risks. And also Chalamet does have kind of he's a bit of a force in terms of recognizability, although he's not like an actor with true star power, I guess. But yeah, what do you make of this one? Because I came out of it like kind of liking it fine. I don't dislike this movie or anything, but clearly I'm pretty happy with I'm Not There being the real biopic, like the good one, and this one kind of just being the obligation.
Oh, hey, John, what's going on?
A lot of things, Will. A lot of dark, twisted things.
Who are you? Hey, who are you? John, how long have you been recording with this man?
Too long, I guess we could both say. Yeah.
What are you saying there, Johnny? I thought we were friends. You were talking about all the good time we had.
I literally said nothing positive about you whatsoever. And
you were just talking about how I'm a genius and how I'm a great artist and all this stuff, and now you're making fun of me.
I just want the listeners to understand that Will is literally putting glasses on and taking them off every time he switches character. It's kind of amazing.
I don't know what you mean by character. And frankly, I don't know what's going on here. I mean, I think this is appalling that you would sabotage me in such a way. But I do have to say, I mean, this man looks awful familiar. John, do you know who we're talking to here?
I think this person is trying to be a sick, twisted version of Johnny Cash. Yes.
Johnny? No, you're Johnny. I'm Bobby.
Yeah, there you go.
Bob Dylan?
I guess so.
All right.
So how are you doing, Will?
Oh, I'm doing fine. How you doing, John?
It could be better.
Well, while you two catch up, I'm going to go check out the lunar lights and see what's going on the other side. All right. I'll catch up with you later, Bobby. Hey, John.
Hey, Will. It's tough. I had a nice little surprise for you. But I guess that can wait. I guess that can be off the mic.
Oh boy, I don't know what the surprise is, but
yeah, maybe you know.
I think I was surprised more so by the fact that we had the legendary Bob Dylan on the mic with us.
That would be surprising, wouldn't it? But yeah, welcome to the show, Will. Happy you're here.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. We'll just kind of teeing you up. I don't know if you caught the end of that. My lamenting, not really lamenting, but more of my sort of curiosity around the reception to this movie, which I think, I don't know, I don't think either of us were expecting it to be amazing, but I think I was at least expecting it to do better financially. I don't know.
And we're talking about A Complete Unknowna, it would seem, with our friend Bob Dylan here. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I guess I was cautiously optimistic about this one. I feel like I'm never fully in the bag with James Mangold. Even like the quote unquote better ones like Logan, I'm still like, yeah, it's good. I don't know if I'm like of the opinion it's one of the best superhero movies of all time, but I think he can be, very respectful, competent director. But I guess for me, the question with doing a Bob Dylan movie in this vein is kind of what's the point? Because Bob Dylan is intentionally much more of an enigma and doing something that is is sort of intentionally straightforward and going for something that's a little bit more cookie cutter. Its approach seemed just kind of counterintuitive to what I feel like was the point of Bob Dylan's legacy, especially at this transformative point in his career. But yeah, I mean, to answer what I believe was your question, I thought the movie was fine. I actually think I enjoyed it more than I expected, given my concerns about the inherent sort of conceit of the project. And I think a lot of that kind of comes down to the strength of core performances, which I think Edward Norton is probably the MVP of the film. Mm-hmm. But I do think Timothée Chalamet kind of rides that nice line between doing a pretty good to great impression of Bob Dylan and then actually kind of inheriting the character. And I feel like for me, I was more with it with him in the second half than the first. And I don't know if that was just an intentional sort of thing where it's like as Bob Dylan becomes more comfortable with who the idea of Bob Dylan is, that Chalamet became more comfortable with his performance, or if it was just sort of a natural kind of cohesion. But yeah, I mean, I think I was with it more than not, and I enjoy these songs. I like these performers, both the subjects of the film and the actors, and I think in addition to what we were saying before, I do really think Joan Baez is that how you actually or Baez?
Joan Baez.
Baez. Okay, I was getting apparently raked over the coals about this in our instant take, so I wanted to make sure I got it right.
Yeah, Will got a bunch of comments from people complaining at his pronunciations, which is my job, to be clear.
Sure, but no, I thought she was also fantastic. I thought her performance is kind of getting overlooked in the scheme of things. I thought she was really great.
I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of notices for her. Maybe not everywhere, but I certainly after I saw the movie, I was like, well, oh wow, okay. Monica Barbaro. I think that she's been doing the press tours, and I have to agree, she really stands out. Like, wow, she really embodies that character, especially because Joan Baez isn't like, at least for our generation, is well known because she was certainly a force like back then, but not exactly somebody I grew up hearing about all the time. Like same with like I knew Woody Guthrie, but Pete Seeger, I didn't really know much about Pete Seeger until I watched the Bob Dylan documentaries, probably over like when I was in my 20s. So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and I think I remember you saying off the mic that you're really impressed with Mangold's muse, not John.
Wait, Mangold's muse?
Boyd Holbrook, who plays Johnny Cash.
Yes. Yeah, I really dug that performance, actually. I was kind of thinking like, I'm one of those folks who like, look, I like Walk the Line. It's not even that, I guess it's a good movie. I guess I just never bought Joaquin Phoenix as Johnny Cash. It's not that the performance is bad, but I just couldn't buy it ever. Because yeah, Johnny Cash is a very, very important musical figure in my life.
Johnny,
and
where's Johnny?
I can't do a Johnny Cash impersonation. I'm sorry.
What do you mean impression?
I can't do it.
All right, fine. Whenever you need. I don't.
But yeah, I think Boyd Holbrook. I mean, after watching Boyd Holbrook do it, I mean, who would even dare try to? Genuinely, I was thinking though, like, wow, like imagine if Boyd Holbrook could have done that performance back in 2009 or whenever that movie came out. I think it would have been quite something. But
yeah, I mean, I think again, I really enjoyed Boyd Holbrook, but I like more that it's because he's in like a supporting role in this, and I feel like Johnny Cash just kind of fits better. Like I like Walk the Line fine as well. I think I might even be a little bit more favorable on it than you, but granted, it's been probably like 15, 20 years now since I've seen it. But I remember enjoying it and really engaging with Joaquin Phoenix's performance in that. But I do remember it kind of feeling like a performance. And this, I like that they lean into that more, and it's just like this kind of ramshackle phase of Johnny Cash's career where he's just kind of like drunk and disorderly and just kind of a proponent for chaos, basically like post Folsom Prism, Johnny Cash stuff. And I don't know. I think that's more fun to me than, trying to like kind of explore his story in a kind of like rise and fall and rise structure. And I do actually like this movie, I think, for as much as Mangold's kind of getting criticized for doing like Walk the Line again post Walk Hard, I do appreciate that he kind of recognizes the restraint of like only focusing on a certain portion of Bob Dylan's life and career. Like I don't, he's not doing the cradle to grave thing again. And I think that's really smart for someone who has like had so many phases and so many like kind of stages like Bob Dylan. But with that said, and I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts on this, and I might have talked about this in the instant take already, and I forget. I feel like this movie would have been better serviced if it was just Pete Seeger's story and like Bob Dylan's like the side character, and we kind of watch his like change happen on the side, because I feel like Pete Seeger's already kind of supposed to be the heart of the film, and this movie has a sort of kind of moral dilemma where they recognize that like Bob Dylan is like this promising upstart kid who, saves the folk scene and then just kind of becomes an asshole and leaves it. and I feel like having Pete Seeger be the sort of main character than the one that, maybe doesn't change as much, but has kind of more of a clear conscience about it would make more sense than just following Bob Dylan, because he's not as much of a, I don't know. I feel like his change happens like off screen, basically.
Yeah, the movie doesn't really have a sense of kind of showing, because it wants to do that enigma thing. All of it happens really fast. That was my main criticism of the movie, is that I didn't buy the progression. It just kind of, the movie just kind of skips ahead at certain points. But
so,
I think I think a Pete Seeger movie would be really fascinating, and I would love a Pete Seeger movie after watching this, honestly, because I found layers to him that Norton really like uncovered that not even the documentary is really kind of capture, right? Because I feel like usually with Dylan's early days and his story, Woody Guthrie is kind of the main focus. Seeger usually is just kind of a bystander by comparison. But I think the issue, of course, is that there's no way that Searchlight would have made, greenlit a $50 to $70 million budget for a Pete Seeger movie, unfortunately.
Well, sure. But what I'm saying, though, is I'm not saying it directly is a Pete Seeger movie. I'm saying if it was sneakily a Pete Seeger movie. Like for me, the second half of the movie, because it focuses so starkly on Bob Dylan, I think it kind of loses its way because, like you said, they try to respect the enigma of Bob Dylan, but that doesn't make for the most clear or coherent, like, main character arc.
Well, the strategy is that we never know what's really going on in his head. We just watch how other people react to him and then how he reacts to others. And it gets old after a while, like at a certain point, because I was with you. I was, while watching the movie, I was like, yeah, this is competently done. I'm enjoying this. It's fun to listen to, a bunch of Bob Dylan cover songs that are not too far away from, the real thing, I guess. And it's also, it looks nice. It's a nice film style, and it's just nice hearing this folk music and context, sure. But then once you get into the second half and you start getting into what the question that the film is really asking, it's almost like the main question of the film is, it isn't seated at the very beginning. So the idea is that why would this guy, why would Bob Dylan leave the folk scene? That's what this movie is really investigating. The first half is all set up in that sense of like, well, first we have to get to the point where him leaving the folk scene matters. And then we just kind of like, he quickly makes that decision, and it's just fallout from like the structure doesn't really work in that sense. So then you have this weird situation, a dilemma, as you called it, where Pete Seeger kind of becomes the antagonist, and it doesn't feel right. It feels a little bit like, well, why is he the antagonist? Because he kind of has a good point, sure. But then if you want to investigate what's going on with Dylan and like why he would want to do this, go ahead and do that. But so far you're painting him in such a way that's so unfavorable that then it does sort of feel like Seeger should be the protagonist, and that Dylan is the one who's kind of the stinker and getting in the way. And it just comes off as a little bit muddled and confused in a way that it doesn't seem like it's Mangold confidently handling the story the way I think he hopefully is, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just the vibe I got, and I feel like that's the version of this movie that like makes more sense, especially considering, like you said already, that there are so many films, like documentaries and narrative films at this point, that explore, to some fashion or another, the Bob Dylan folk tale, basically, and the idea of like, you can't really pin him down, but he's so fascinating and such a, withstanding cultural icon that, he is an inherently very, intriguing and worthwhile person to explore. But in a sort of stifled product or story structure like this one, it doesn't really honor that as well. And I feel like having, Pete Seeger sneakily be the main character makes that make more sense, because he's the one that has a kind of more traditional arc and kind of a
I
more,
guess so. I mean,
yeah.
what would be your kind of? I'm trying to think of another movie in the music biopic realm that even comes close to doing that. I mean, I guess it just seems like all the ones I'm thinking of, you do have just like main supporting characters. This one has a few, and I think that my least favorite is the Elle Fanning character. I feel like she's so unrealized in this compared to the Joan Baez character, who I think clearly has more of like, I don't know, it feels like she has more to do in this. But sure, I mean, I'm thinking of like with Bohemian Rhapsody, that was something that movie tried to do with, Freddie Mercury's like, first wife and everything, or only wife. And then when you have a movie like Walk the Line, of course, June, is the character that sort of fits that rule. But I can't think of one where it's like somebody who kind of comes in, sort of like, I guess, how like the villain is the main character. Like the first thing I think of, like the one of the more popular examples is Infinity War. The protagonist really is Thanos, right? I mean, that was kind of the thing that people liked about that. I can't believe Infinity War is the movie that gets brought up during the Complete Unknown conversation, well, but there you go.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not even saying necessarily that there needs to be a stark villain and hero here. I feel like that's
I know. I'm just saying, people say that movie really, like the story is really Thanos's, because he's the one who's driving the plot, and it's more about his conflict and tension and all that.
I don't know. I just think of like, there's a movie Control, the Joy Division film, that recognizes like this lead singer is inherently fascinating and tragic person, but they don't really sugarcoat the like, bad qualities of him and the stuff that was hard. Or like maybe something like Sid and Nancy, where like they kind of recognize the like trouble there and like how it's fascinating, but ultimately just sort of ill-fated. But also,
would it be like if you had the Beatles movie have Pete Best be the main character?
Well, sure, yeah,
that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be all for that. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of interested in the Sam Mendes Beatles movie, but I would love to see, just the Beatles from Pete Best's perspective. But in any case,
I mean, Saturday Night, I mean, it's from Lorne Michaels' perspective. That's a very specific thing. It's not Chevy Chase. It's not, sure, Belushi. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. For me, especially when we're talking about Bob Dylan, someone who took great strides to not kind of follow any sort of traditional arc, to not be someone who is boxed into a certain perception. We have like 3 music biopics essentially out right now, or I maybe I shouldn't say out right now, that I have seen or are planning to see. And that's like Kneecap, this movie, and then like the Robbie Williams Better Man. And it seems weird that the Bob Dylan one is the one that's like the most ordinary, like it's just weird that like, yeah. I don't know, like both those movies. And I know you like Kneecap, so I know you saw that one. Yeah. And it's not saying that movie's like revolutionary in any particular respect, but it feels like
it's got energy to it.
Yeah, it's got energy. It's doing some like fun, spunky things. It almost kind of feels like
it's interesting. It's like the subject matter. It's about something that, a lot of movies haven't really tackled before.
Yeah, it almost feels like Trainspotting at times, like that movie. It's just like not what you expect. And it's also like kind of takes a risk by having the actual people play themselves. And, like, and like, just kind of takes more gambles than like something like this, where, if there's ever a music biopic and ever a time where you want to like kind of take a gamble, you would think it would be like the Bob Dylan story, but I don't know. And that's why I'm just kind of frustrated by, like I said, the initial conceit of the film, because it just seems counterintuitive to what a Bob Dylan movie is or should be. And I think that's maybe
the argument against that, though, would be like, well, we already have that movie, so it's like, why not just kind of do the boring biopic version that'll probably make money? Because the artistic version that actually captures the spirit of the man and exists, it's been around for years, it's obviously amazing, people loved it. I mean, well, not everybody loved it, I guess, but
I mean, you're wondering why the movie's not doing expectations. That's a pretty bleak way to sell a film. Like, well, you've seen the interesting one. How about the boring one?
Right, right. Well, no, I mean, I guess I think the marketing speak would be, here's the accessible one. We're not going to do this thing where Bob Dylan's played by 7 different people, and you have to, because I mean, it isn't. I'm not there. It isn't very accessible. You have to know a lot about Bob Dylan to appreciate that movie. If you don't, like, if you have no context really, then that movie's probably going to come off as very weird. But this movie, you don't have to know anything about Dylan. You could just be a total newcomer. But then I think the problem is that that doesn't really appeal to the hardcore fans as much. I think that what you're trying to do then is kind of feed off of the people who might kind of be, socially aware of Bob Dylan, be like, oh yeah, I've heard a few Bob Dylan songs in my life, but I've never really dug in. And this could be the movie that does that for you. It's just, I don't know, maybe they overestimated how many people would be, intrigued. And I think that with music biopics, that's not really powers their success. Usually it's because these are bands like Queen, and even Rocket Man. I think like a lot of people just show up because they love Elton John, because they love Queen, and they think that it'll be fun to watch a movie about the band.
Right. But even Rocket Man, I feel like took some risks. Like most of the movie, he's this like drug addled, borderline self-destructive personality. And, it's someone that culturally know and love. It's their early years, but they, it takes the risk of not showing him in the most positive or enthusiastic light without sacrificing the fact that he is like this, the main focus.
I think this movie kind of does that. I mean,
I know,
because he's a jerk for like the whole time, basically.
Right. Yeah, and I get that, but what I'm saying, and I appreciate that, because I don't know a version of this film where they sanctify him, which I was kind of worried about in the first half, where it's like every moment, like a character who is at this point never met Bob Dylan is like instantly in awe, as if they're watching the second coming of Christ.
Like, just wait, like, oh, who wrote this song?
Right, yeah,
he did.
Right.
Like, all right, I'm pretty sure that conversation didn't happen. I'm pretty sure somebody was like, oh, that's kind of catchy. That's it.
I heard a rumor, and I don't know if it's true, because I know Bob Dylan was like heavily consulted for the film, so it's not like they made it against his wishes or anything. Like, I think he's pretty on board with this. I think he's spoken positively. I don't know if he's seen it yet, or if he will even. But I think he did say at one point, like, there had to be one scene, or at least one scene in the film that is completely fictional, because he wants to honor that sort of folk personality of just like not being completely steeped in truth or fiction. And I'm not sure what scene that is. And I feel like that would normally be a compliment to a film like this, but I feel like that's more, a criticism of it, because I don't feel like the movie has any risky or interesting choices that it makes. So I don't really know which one's like the one that they took for Bob Dylan's consent on the project.
Yeah, I think that's a more impressionistic version of this movie that maybe splits the difference a little bit better, that maybe could do the Rocket Man thing where you illustrate the enigma of Dylan through something more heightened, something that has a spectacle to it. But no, they went for the more grounded approach. They went for something that, like, yeah, it's not cradle to grave. Yeah, we're not doing the thing where he's addicted to drugs for half the movie, but we're just kind of doing like here's who this guy is, here's how he took the world by storm, and then here's the dilemma he faced. And here's an interesting question about, what do you do when you don't want to be typecast anymore, because you see kind of the train wreck coming. You see that, like, if you keep on this path, you're going to, creatively get stuck into a rut. But of course, the world's going to judge you. They're going to see you as a sellout. They're going to see, there's something interesting to that, especially because this movie does leave out some of, like, the way that Dylan in real life responded to when the Beatles were coming up. Like, he was initially very dismissive of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and that kind of movement, the UK invasion. But then eventually, like, that's a big reason why a lot of people were so, like, put off by his decision to kind of go down the rock and roll train, which is why, because he had initially turned his nose to it, and then it ultimately started doing it. and people were a little bit like, you were the chosen one, all that stuff. There's something interesting there. And this movie does it. It gets there. But then I think at other times it's like, it's throwing in a lot of the, like, relationship drama in there too, that a lot of it doesn't really ring true to me. I mentioned already, like, I feel like the Elle Fanning character just didn't quite work for me. I know she's based on, like, a fictional version of a real person. Dylan specifically was like, I do not want the real person's name to be used in this movie. So I don't know. I felt like that character was just kind of anonymous. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they were more of a composite, honestly. I know I saw a documentary once that did talk more about this person and, like, kind of like what
are you saying, that she is a complete unknown?
Like a rolling stone. You know, we never talked about our own relationships with Dylan coming into this. We didn't really set the stage there. I mean, I know you're a big fan of Dylan. I'm a big fan of Dylan too. I grew up though people saying that like, well, you're either a Dylan fan or a Beatles fan. I love the Beatles. Like I grew up on the Beatles first. Dylan I didn't get into until I was a little bit older and I had more of an acquired taste. Or I started getting into folk more like right after college. And that's for me, Beatles is high school, college. Dylan is my 20s. And I feel like that's pretty normal, I guess, actually, because, you know, I was getting into the folk scene around then.
I don't know if I've ever heard this like Blood and Crips comparison between
It's a
the
real
Beatles
thing.
and Bob Dylan. I've heard that more with like the Beatles and Rolling Stones, I should say.
Really?
You know, I've heard
to
people
me,
be
that's like Pepsi versus Coke, though.
well, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying I've heard
Okay.
that back and forth.
I know Steve Jobs said something like that once when he was talking about the iPod or whatever. He was saying that like, yeah, you know, people usually say either Dylan or Beatles, and he was a Dylan guy. But anyway,
He would be a
we can have
Dylan
both.
guy.
Yeah.
Even though Apple is like such a Beatles, you know, whatever.
Yeah. Because Apple Records
Right.
but yeah, no, I know you love Bob Dylan quite a bit. I would say you're probably a bigger fan than I am.
I mean, I saw him live in September. He was my number one artist on Apple Music this past year, and I mean, I'm sure that's at least partially related to both seeing him live and you know this movie. But
Do you have a favorite Dylan era?
I mean, Blood and Tracks is my favorite album. I mean, I think
Yeah.
you know Highway
Mangled
60,
Up in Blue is probably my favorite song.
yeah, it's a great one. I mean, I think a lot's you know been said about Highway 61 Revisit, and I can see why that's. I mean, it is one of his best albums. I don't know if it's necessarily my favorite. It could very well be his best one. I don't know. It's hard to say because, you know, like you said, there's so many great times and eras. I don't know. I'm even kind of sympathetic to like the Christian era.
The
I think there's,
gospel.
yeah, I think it's kind of fascinating. But, you know, like I was even listening to like Self Portrait and I'm like, you know, like I don't know if this is a good album, but I don't know. I mean, I don't hate this. Like I think it's at least interesting what he's doing here.
And he's still making stuff. I mean, Make You Feel My Love is one of my favorite love ballads ever. And I know it gets, you know,
I mean,
some people are a little snobby with it, but
Time Out of Mind, I think, is probably one of his top 5 albums, and that's kind of late into his career. So,
yeah, I mean, the guy's just always been working, always been making interesting music, and yeah, I'm glad you're a fellow fan, just because for me, I think folk music it's a sad thing how it had this moment in the 60s, and this movie doesn't really get into it much, but there was one documentary I saw years ago, might be on YouTube, but it was talking about like the 60s folk revolution, obviously, but Dylan being a huge fixture of it and Baez, but like how once things went into rock and roll, like we never quite had a folk scene revival ever again after that. You know, in 60 years, we just haven't seen something even close to a similar to where, like during that time, like folk music was ubiquitous. People were listening to it in, you know, huge numbers that just we never ever returned to, which I guess is okay. I mean, it's not like folk music has to be mainstream. I guess that is kind of against the idea of it. You could even make the argument that one of the reasons Dylan left it is because he was becoming mainstream and that probably felt off to him.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there are people who are like folk adjacent that are popular, like, you know, like Mumford and Sons and Avett Brothers. And,
that's more Americana, though, right? I mean, I feel like calling them folk adjacent, I mean, except for Mumford and Sons' first album, I would say that the Lumineers would probably be a closer comparison.
I mean, you know, even like Taylor Swift's kind of dipped her toes a little bit in the folk, not enough to be like a folk star, but
she did like one album. Yeah. Right. I mean, yeah. And it's not to say that people don't enjoy folk and that it doesn't have its place, but in terms of like being played on the radio station all the time, it's like, yeah, I guess the closest thing we ever had to it was, when you and I were in college, right? It was like the early 2010s when Mumford and Sons had that big album, and then Lumineers had Ho Hey, and there was Little Ships or Little Words? I forget what it was, but there were just a bunch of songs that had the stomping on the bar floor kind of aesthetic.
Oh yeah, yeah. Hey,
ho, it's like a year or two.
Yeah,
that song for sure.
You belong with me, yeah,
sweetheart. But
you belong with you, yeah.
I saw Lumineers live a couple years ago, and they're pretty good live. Not my favorite band or anything, but I think I was a little bit overly mean to them at one point. But anyway, that's off a
You're
tangent.
talking about these Lumineers, but I want to illuminate me as to why you feel like this movie is not making me this genius that you think I am.
The movie is pretty long, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I didn't balk at the length though. I thought that it was, I don't know. I think if anything it was too rushed, the pacing of it. So maybe that says something in its favor. It's looking like it's going to have some awards attention. I think Chalamet for sure will get nominated for Best Actor. It did get nominated for Golden Globes. Those were last night. Didn't win anything though, I don't believe. And was nominated for Best Motion Picture and Drama category, Best Actor, of course. And then Norton got a Best Supporting Actor nod. And if this movie wins anything, something for Norton, I think would be really nice in the supporting.
It is wild that there's like no original like Bob Dylan song for the movie, like he did with like for Wonder Boys and stuff.
Yeah, that's true, huh?
But it's funny because like he did do an original song for a movie this year. But can you guess what movie it was?
No, I have no idea.
I bet you're not going to guess. I'll give you 5 guesses. I'm very curious to see if you get close.
5 guesses. So the question, it's an original Bob Dylan song.
Yes. He wrote an original song for a new movie that came out this year.
Do I get like any hints at all?
It will not be nominated for any Oscars.
What? Okay, that's one hint. One more hint.
It is more likely to be on people's worst list than best list this year.
Well, I know it's not Mufasa.
It's a film that this actually might be a pretty good hint. It's a film that Tyrone may have seen.
Oh, it's Reagan. It's got to be Reagan. Well, it would be either Reagan or that Horizon movie, huh?
Right. Yeah. No, it was Reagan.
Wow. Well, yeah. Thank you. That if not for that hint, I never would have got it.
I know. But you weren't even like trying to like guess like like.
Yeah, I was lost. I was like, well, of all the movies this year, like how am I gonna? And a movie that I clearly didn't see. Anyway, but yeah, so we'll see though how it does come award season. We still have a lot of stuff just on this show to get to. We have a few awards favorites we're gonna hopefully cover soon. I already mentioned box office, not super impressive so far. It's made 41.7 million so far, but I mean its budget is as high as 70. So the fact that it hasn't even made its budget back yet and it's well short, I think this thing is going to lose money for Searchlight unless it gets a bit of an awards bump over the next month or two, which is possible.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I don't know. I mean, I could see it getting a little bit of a bump. I don't know. I don't know if they were ever expecting this to be like a box office smash. I think they were certainly hoping it would do well, but I think they were expecting it to be more of like an award starling than a box office phenomenon.
I mean, it is, yeah. And I mean, it is January. I think that Wicked is still kind of sucking in the oxygen. But now that movie, I think, is on streaming at this point, that's going to be dying down a little bit. Sonic is probably going to die down pretty soon. Mufasa was dead on arrival. So
you say that, but Mufasa beat Sonic like a few days ago.
Wasn't that the first time, though? Sonic beat it, like in the opening?
I just think it's interesting that that's the only movie I think that's like growing. Really, like since its release,
I think a lot of people just didn't know that it came out.
Sure,
honestly, and then all the Sonic heads kind of overwhelmed the theaters,
right?
And then,
we were talking off the air that it probably would have made more sense to release this either this summer or next summer.
Yeah,
like releasing it in winter. Like I don't know if they thought because Barry Jenkins was involved that was going to be like an awards contender or something.
Weird. Right? Yeah, especially because they already had Moana 2 at Thanksgiving, which kind of didn't do super hot. And then, this one, I think, if Mufasa had come out Thanksgiving, maybe that would have been better. But then also the fact that like there's already kind of this musical in the room with Wicked. I don't know. Maybe they underestimated how well that would do, which would be fascinating.
Like, I don't know. It just, like having Moana 2 and Mufasa kind of like contradict rather than help one another.
Yep.
And then just have Wicked and Sonic just kind of eat their lunch, just like not only
for Disney right now, that's for sure.
Right. Not only because they're both like, high profile special effects, blockbuster movies, but they're both in that PG range. So it's just like, it doesn't.
And they're musicals.
Right. And so it just doesn't,
I think they thought that Lin-Manuel Miranda, though, would kind of elevate it. And
you say that?
But most people don't even know that he's just in music. And the music apparently is getting memed. It's so bad.
I was going to say, I didn't even know he was involved until like a week before the movie came out.
Same. Yeah. So there you go. It's a tough time for Disney at the moment. I'd say at the same time though, their show, the new Star Wars show, Skeleton Crew, very good. I actually really have enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite Star Wars things they've done lately. Not that I would think that you would like it, because I don't think anything Star Wars is going to be your cup of tea for a while.
That's the one Jude Law's in, right?
Yeah, Jude Law is in that, but he's a supporting character. It's really about these like 4 kids, and it's really John Watts, who, by the way, I finally saw Wolves, and I was a big fan.
Oh, really?
But yeah. But you can really feel like John Watts's influence on it, the Daniels kind of influence on it is really, really present. You can tell that it was like one of those weird things where they had a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but it's just a nice premise. Like it's very kind of sweet and fun. It's like very Goonies in space.
What is the John Watts influence?
I think with the John Watts thing, it has like kind of the edgier, darker thing that he does with Wolves, but it's like kind of in an ironic way. So I know with John Watts, like, people usually think like Spider-Man for sure. But I think even in like Far From Home, for example, it did kind of like delve into some of like darker psychological stuff, but it was sneaky about it, because you do have the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, like he's trying to save stuff, but he's good at kind of working in the darkness a little bit, like where it's appropriate, and that's what this show does.
Sorry. I know this is not my place, not my show, not my time, not my way. But I don't know why we're talking about these Star Wars when we should be talking about the war against the box office that makes my movie not do that well.
Well, let's position that into the critical stuff with the movie. Let's do the Rotten Tomatoes game for A Complete Unknown. Let's see how it did. Will Ashton, we have 220 reviews counted for A Complete Unknown. What do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score is right now?
Do you want me to guess, or do you want my friend Bob to guess?
How about both? How could I choose?
Well, I don't know much about these tomatoes, but I have to imagine that they only go higher and higher. So I'm going to say 500%.
Earlier, you said that you didn't know who this man was, and now you're calling him your friend.
Well, we got to know each other through the podcast.
Ah, I see.
If you would pay attention and actually engage with him rather than fought him and dismissed him, you would see that he's actually a pretty nice guy if you get to know him.
He's a bit of an enigma. There's no way I could have figured him out. But Will Ashton, what is your guess?
I'm going to say, I think it's actually getting like across the board, like good reviews. Like I've heard generally people are liking it. Like I know, like we were saying, the Bob Dylan fans are coming in with their snark, but even like I've seen some people who I thought were going to be deeply critical of the movie be like, yeah, like what we were saying, like, even though we were spending a lot of time criticizing the movie, it's not a bad film. Like I think it's entertaining. I think it's competently made and all that, despite its flaws. I enjoy, like you said, watching celebrities do karaoke of songs I like.
But you hate jukebox musicals.
I do. But I think there's a difference between a biopic and a musical. I think there are expectations that go into to those that are in biopics. But in any case, that's neither here nor there. I will say this is heading 79%.
79 is spot on. There you go. Been a while since you got it perfect first try.
Oh, that I didn't even expect it to be spot on. Wow.
Yeah, 79%. Yeah, I mean, it's not super high, but it's still certified fresh. And I'm one of the positives. I gave it a 7 out of 10. And
nice.
Yeah, in the critics' consensus, it says, charged by Timothée Chalamet's electric performance, this ballad of Bob Dylan might not get under the enigmatic artist's skin, but will make you feel like you spent time in his company. Which, yeah, I think that's fair enough.
I mean, let's be fair. I was in the right ballpark.
Let's do the popcorn meter next. Just Will Ashton this time. What do you think the audiences have to say about this one?
I resent that. I'm going to say, I think they're going to be more positive than critics, just because I don't think they're going to come in with like a certain, I don't want to say baggage, but like a certain, like expectation of what this movie should be. I think they're just going to enjoy, Timothée Chalamet's performance, just kind of period details and all that. I'm going to say 86%.
Higher, 96%. A thing like that. Definitely higher than I would have guessed. That's for sure.
Well, I'm glad you brought in Mad Men, because I was thinking that one scene where like, Bob Dylan gets quote unquote introduced. Oh yeah. That little cafe bar thing looks very similar to that location season 1 of Mad Men when Don goes with the hippies to
yeah.
So I was kind of hoping like in the background you just see Don, just chastising these hippies.
Right.
Bob Dylan is just, like, that was great.
Cops suck. Yeah, and speaking of Mad Men, I mean, sheesh, I finally saw Fly Me to the Moon. Talk about a movie that skimmed the first couple seasons. Anyway, okay, so cinema score. Will Ashton, what do you think the cinema score is for A Complete Unknown?
Is it a B plus?
It is an A. I'm surprised you lowballed it because of after hearing the audience score. I thought you were going to adjust.
Well, I did adjust, but I just didn't think it would be that high.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, no, an A. Look, the folks in Vegas, they know all about encores and performing acts. I mean, they got what they wanted, that's for sure.
Yeah, Vegas, wild city, wild times. I've been on some wild trips in Vegas, and let me tell you, I don't know if I've ever come back.
Yeah, gambling man. All right, so then let's finish up with the Letterboxd rating. Letterboxd from 0 to 5. What do you think the average rating is? We have 171,000 watches logged on the site, which is a decent amount.
I feel like this is a very 3.5 out of 5 Letterboxd kind of movie. That's what I'm going to say.
It is 3.6. So yeah, only 0.1 off. Not bad. So, overall, not a bad showing from you, Mr. Will Ashton. Let's check in though real quick on some friends of the show have to say on Letterboxd.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Bob.
Yeah, what? Some friends, some Bobs of the show?
Well, you were saying, let's check in. I think he thought you were going to say, let's check in with our friend Bob. Yeah, with our friend Bob. And,
Nah, we're going way over time at this point. Okay, so Ryan Oliver, he gave it 3.5 stars. He said, you have to hand it to James Mangold. It takes some real balls to know of the existence of Walk Hard, spoofing his own Walk the Line, as well as a scene that spoofs Dylan himself, and then sign on to not only do a Dylan biopic, but have Johnny Cash in it as a character with absolutely zero self-consciousness. Highly agree. Anyway, I get the criticisms here. For if you're a Dylan fan, there's nothing you didn't already know from the Pennebaker and Scorsese docs. However, I wanted to live in the atmosphere of this movie for a very long time and longed for a cigarette when it ended, and I don't smoke. The wise move here was not making a decade-spanning biopic and instead carving out a moment in time about the changing of the guard, pun intended, for folk music as a whole. Whole cast is incredible, especially Ed Norton as Pete Seeger and Monica Barbaro as Joan Baez. It's no masterpiece like Inside Llewyn Davis in regards to the Greenwich Village folk scene, but it's still breezy and entertaining.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that. I think maybe he's a little bit higher than I was, but I think that kind of gets into why I'm ultimately more favorable than not on the film.
He's a bigger fan of Inside Llewyn Davis than I am, but maybe I watch that film.
I love Inside Llewyn Davis. I think that's definitely the better.
Yeah, I know I'm in the
Dylan biopic in that respect. Yeah,
I'm in the minority for that one, I suppose, for sure. Okay, so then Charlie Ridgely also gave it 3.5 stars. So you were right, lots of 3.5s. He wrote, the story feels like it both covers too much time in Dylan's life and not nearly enough. It's hard to explain, but either cover a very tiny portion of somebody's life or cover a huge chunk of it. Where the narrative structure is lacking, though, A Complete Unknown makes up for it with some top-shelf performances, fantastic music sung by the actors, F Off Forever, Bohemian Rhapsody, and Mangold's steady hand. It's never not a breeze to sit with, even if most of it is surface-level biopic. Monica Barbaro, goodness gracious, Timmy is the star we thought he was, and as much as I usually dislike Boyd Holbrook, he plays one heck of a Johnny Cash. I really prefer this to Joaquin's. He's got that chaotic twinkle in his eye you just can't look away from. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go as far to say that I don't like Holbrook and other things, but I'm with Charlie. I only can reiterate that was just a Johnny Cash I really enjoyed.
I mean, it also helps. I think Boyd Holbrook looks a little bit more like Johnny Cash than
he does. Well, that's the thing is I don't mind if actors don't totally look like the character, but it's all about the personality, and that's where it is.
Again, I mean, and like I said, it's been 20 years since I've seen Walk the Line, but I think they're just different expectations. I think a supporting performance like this, where he's just kind of a glorified cameo, is much different kind of take on Bob. Yeah, dear Johnny.
Abigail Chessie, not too kind on this one. She gave it 2.5 stars. Our friend and former co-host. She wrote, brought my dad to the screening and he hummed along to all the songs. Dad approved. Points off for this movie treating Joan Baez and a great performance by Monica Barbaro like a folk purist scold. Interesting characterization there. Will's holding up Abby's book.
I got her book. I got Abby's book.
Seasons.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it.
Have you started reading it yet?
No, not yet. I'm behind on a lot of books right now, but I do want to read it this year.
Very excited to hear what you think. Do you agree with that, though, about Joan Baez being a folk purist scold? I don't know. I feel like she was just kind of like a scold in general with Dylan, and it was more about just really not approving of the way he was acting. But I don't know.
I don't even think it was really him being a scold. It was just she was just like, Bob, you're being an asshole again. And he would just say cryptic, things just going on. And She was just like, well, why don't we play a song that everyone likes? Just like, people just want me to be all these different things. And it's just like, yeah, because you're famous. You're a famous musician. They want to hear the famous songs. It's like, I don't want to go. Like,
Alex Billington gave it 4.5 stars. I'm just going to breeze through a few more of these. Kristen Lopez gave it 2 stars. Corey Woodruff did not rate it. He wrote a pretty long thing about it. I'll try to read it quick. He said, watching Chalamet, a bona fide movie star having one of the biggest years of anybody in recent Hollywood memory, as Dylan dodging the a little too adoring fans who would do anything to touch the hem of his garment as he navigates that very invasive rush in his own life, the sober reservation, table flipping frustration on his face that even the best actors can't muster without real life experience to lean back on, an artist who's stuck accepting the bargain of fame for their generational talents. Chalamet goes electric. I'm a little taken aback by how brash this film is to its subject, how willing it is to present Dylan as a titanic force of music genius and a freewheeling prick whose aloof a-holery might be what's partially fueling some of the greatest songs of all time. Not a bad guy, but one a little too willing to blow in the wind at other people's expense. But that's what makes the Dylan mystique what it is. He's one of our great enigmas. For all the biopic trappings and hey, what do you know, it's that song moments, that unresolved portrait keeps this one on its toes, undeniably engrossing and a little deeper than it lets on. Norton, Barbaro, and Fanning almost steal the show, but Chalamet literally pulls off Dylan. Dewey Cox always strums a bit in the back of these movies, particularly with the filmmaker, but this one is thorny enough to feel worthy of examining its subject, however limited a Dylan movie that stops in 1965 can be. One thing we didn't really talk about too is like the kind of transition where Dylan kind of has like his entourage in the second part of the movie, and he's kind of like surrounded by these like randos basically, that I felt like a lot of that was a little unexplored in a way that I didn't dislike necessarily, but I was kind of confused at times.
I mean, that gets into like the second half does have a lot more of the like tropey, like biopic-y, like somebody walks into the studio, Bob doesn't know who they are, but they need a keyboardist, and he sits down, and little does he know he's making music history,
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. Like, that stuff's so corny.
The elevator scene, yeah. Amanda the Jedi also did not give it a rating, but she wrote, if nothing else, it's gotten me to give Dylan's music another shot. This movie just has nothing to say. Lightly grazes anything of interest before kicking into another song. Not a bad watch, though. Yeah, it sounds like this one just wasn't for her. Especially, like, I don't know. I guess, like, this movie is a tough sell if you don't have, like, any sort of, like, Bob Dylan appreciation. But I guess, I don't know. That's what they were going for, wasn't it? Like, they wanted that audience.
I mean, I think this movie is made exactly for the folks who like, freewheeling Bob Dylan and Highway 61 Revisited, but like in a dad way where it's just like, hey, I know that song. I love this song. But they don't think about the political or social or, the themes of the song. They just are like, that's a song I know. Snap my fingers, enjoy these tunes, like, a kind of surface level examination of it. And I do think Mangold's trying to at least explore like what this represents for the time and place. I just think it's kind of, like we said, muddled or just too superficial for its own good.
Isaac Feldberg, also no rating, which is a surprise. I think because a lot of these folks, when they saw it, it was the earliest screenings and we couldn't do any reviews back then. So that's probably why they didn't do the stars. But Feldberg wrote a pretty long thing here. I'm only reading a tiny bit of it, but he wrote, as one of the American century's most deliberately enigmatic artists, a poet laureate of folk rock, he resisted that label and any others thrust upon him in favor of one reinvention after another. Bob Dylan is hard to pin down, difficult to define. But in dramatizing 4 early years of his life and career as he rose from anonymity to prominence in the American folk music scene and shrugged it all off with an electric set at Newport, A Complete Unknown scarcely even advances a theory, a concept of what drove Dylan through the start of his musical life. And I'll drop down to the end of this. He says, one questions what this film has to say about Dylan, if anything, even as it gradually becomes clear that Mangold and Cox are after something more akin to a play the hits tribute, fitting in as many of Dylan's best-known compositions as they can without a care in the world for how they came into being. One has to believe that Dylan, the Dylan of this time, at least would have despised such a conformist tribute on sight. Pretty harsh. I would say that I probably did not like the movie. But the thing I guess I sort of push back on is that I'm kind of glad we don't get those scenes where it's like, here's how he made the song, because we don't know and he wouldn't tell us. So like, what you can't just making it up, I think, would be disappointing no matter what.
Well, I'm not going to write a song tutorial. My songs just come to me. I'm not going to tell you what
just comes. Oh, all right. We're running pretty low on time, so I'm just going to breeze through the next. Aaron Dicer gave it 4 stars. Clint Worthington gave it 3 stars. Emma Sasek gave it 3.5. We'll read hers. It's Aunt Emma. The listeners love Aunt Emma, as we were talking about on our September 5 episode. But she wrote, Timmy Tim really did the damn thing. He completely immerses himself in Bob Dylan's world and is so charismatic to watch, although a bit of an ass as well. Wonderful performances from Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, and Monica Barbaro to round out the film, though I wish there was something for the ladies to do in the movie. I'm glad it stuck to just one time period in Dylan's life as opposed to trying to get everything crammed in here. It has some flaws with its storytelling, but overall, a really solid watch. Yeah, I guess people really like... am I the outlier when it comes to Elle Fanning in this movie? She just did not work for me, but it seems like other people are totally fine with her.
I mean, I didn't dislike her performance. I do agree, though. I think from a script standpoint, she's just kind of, written off and not really given a lot of, wiggle room to be more than just a service to the plot, basically.
Right. Which is what I was kind of curious. Maybe that was what Abby was getting at too, but with Barbaro. But yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, and then last we have Chris Evangelista, who did not give it a rating because, again, he did a pretty early review of it. But yeah, Chris said, Bob Dylan's got to think about all of his personas before he plays. That's fun. All right, well,
what about,
I guess that'll do it.
What about my Letterboxd review? I was pretty happy with that one.
Well, you're not a friend of the show. You are the show.
I know, but I think it should be read.
You did write Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan should have kissed. I'm with you there.
Yeah, where is Johnny? I keep looking for him.
Well, if all you have to do is, you have to pucker your lips and then sing hallelujah.
Hey, there's Johnny. Finally.
Yeah, get out of my face.
Oh.
Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of Cinemaholics. Thanks so much for listening, as always. We have a lot of other movies we want to get into this January as we are moving through we have the Oscar nominations, hopefully soon. We have Critics' Choice. We did our voting for that already, and we have Sundance coming up later in the month. But for now, I think the only movie on the horizon for us that we're pretty sure we're going to cover is Nosferatu. How could we miss Robert Eggers, right? But there are a few others in the cards as well that we haven't gotten to yet. Just let us know, of course, as always, if you have any feedback on the show, anything you would like us to check out or talk about. Cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com is how you get in touch. But with that, we're about done for the show, aren't we?
I guess so, yeah. I was going to say, I've seen a whole lot of stuff in the last week or so because I was trying to catch up for our first official Pittsburgh Film Critic Association ballot, which I was very excited. I got some screeners I normally wouldn't get, and yeah, I can't say what the nominees are because we just submitted our final ballot and they haven't been announced yet. But yeah, I am certainly happy to discuss a lot of those films I've seen with you if you get a chance to check them out. And I think you've already seen quite a few of them, so yeah, maybe we'll discuss them.
The two main ones, three main ones. Nickel Boys, The Brutalist, Baby Girl. I think those are three standouts where I'm like, I want to talk to you about those movies as soon as we can.
Definitely. I want to talk about all three.
And I do need to catch Flow. I haven't seen Flow yet.
I've seen Flow, yeah.
I'd like to. I know it won the award last night, and so...
Oh, it did?
Yeah, it won Best Animated. So, yeah, I'm excited to get into Flow. There you go. But all right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Cinemaholics. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back soon from the Internet California. I'm Jon Negroni.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton. You thought I was going to bring back Bobby, but no, I'm just me.
See you next time.
Ah.